what's happening in the UK right now, and you
Yeah.
just see like massive amounts of people.
Yep.
What's happening?
Well,
And are they okay?
As far as I understand it, the UK has allowed refugees and migrants from all over the world into their country, basically from all over Europe into their country because of bad political practices, policy. And as a result of that, there is this strife and division that's been created because when these migrants commit a crime, then so many times that kind of thing can happen before the locals, the natives, get really frustrated. So the most recent development, as I understand it, is 3 little girls were murdered by somebody who wasn't actually a migrant, but whose parents were Rwandan. This is somebody who is in the country, not an Englishman, 17 years old, I believe, murdered, stabbed, basically 3 little girls outside of a dance class, a Taylor Swift themed dance class. And that's when everybody went ballistic.
Oh, wow.
And then the government in the UK is cracking down on white extremism or Islamophobia, as they call it. But a lot of these riots are Muslims walking around with baseball bats and machetes and just beating the shit out of random white people. So that's what's going on, as I understand it. And the way I look at the UK and Europe is like foreshadowing for the United States. So we have the benefit of being an entire ocean away from all the problems in the Middle East, the problems in Europe. But we still have some similar policies that the UK has and other countries in Europe have that have created problems for them, where our border is being invaded by people from all over the world through the southern border. And ultimately what that's going to do in time is exactly what we're seeing in the UK right now. It's going to create strife and problems because it's not that I have an anti-immigration perspective, but immigration is supposed to come with assimilation. Like when our ancestors came here from wherever, mine came over in 1893 from Switzerland, they learn how to speak English and they become Americans. But when you have a migrant policy that's not a citizenship policy, it's not an immigration policy, it's just adopting migrants suddenly, then they come over here, they refuse to assimilate, and then you have conflict between the cultures. So people can come here all they want as long as they become Americans, or people can go to England all they want as long as they become English. But when you have major swaths of people going into a new location, not assimilating, then you have conflict. I mean, if you think about the United States, for example, people came over here for hundreds of years before the United States was founded, and there was tons of conflict with the Native Americans and us, or Europeans, because the Europeans didn't come over here to assimilate. If they would have come here and like joined up with the Sioux, joined up with the Iroquois, that some did, like the Sam Houstons and others lived with the Indians and did that whole thing, and they were fine. But we didn't come here to assimilate, and that's why there was conflict. And so if you allow another group of people to come into your home that doesn't plan on actually becoming part of your culture, then eventually it's going to lead to violence.
So where's the line between, because I 100% agree with you, but where's the line between assimilation and then holding on to your culture? So if you come here and like you're Italian or Japanese or whatever, and you want to hold on to certain things, like what does assimilation mean to you?
That's a really good question. So I actually made a joke about this on air on Sunday night. I was like, look, people came over here and they kept a semblance of their culture, mainly cuisine.
Yeah.
Or like a Yule log if you're German, right? Maybe you throw a log in the fire every Christmas. But everything else is the same. So it's this idea that if you're going to come to America, then you should believe in things like mainly the Bill of Rights, in my opinion, and then the language, of course, too. But things like freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of press, right to bear arms, that kind of stuff. We should not be accepting anybody in this country that doesn't just like solemnly swear to the Bill of Rights, in my opinion. I don't really care about anything after the first 10. That's the Bill of Rights. I'm questionable on some of the other ones post facto, but Bill of Rights is like the number one thing that comes to mind. And understanding the difference between a democracy and a republic, supporting the notion of America as a republic, and then learning the language, I think that's enough. It's not that complicated. It's not supposed to be like an epic exclusive club, but when you have 30,000 people since October coming into the United States from the CCP illegally through the southern border, when in 2021 the number of Chinese that were captured at the border was like 327, you realize like, okay, it's impossible to get out of the CCP illegally.
Right.
So they're sending tens of thousands of people here by order. Like that freaks me out,
I was just going to ask that because you're not leaving without them knowing.
Right. It's like there's totally an invasion happening right now. And the thing is, when there's a conflict then with Iran or Hezbollah or Hamas or whatever, any of these radical Middle Eastern, basically Muslim organizations, then they can activate all the sleeper cells. So do you think that it's a coincidence that what's happening in the UK now is happening all in the context of the fact that Iran is about ready to go war with Israel over this October 7th terrorist attack stuff that happened between the Gazans and this carpet bombing that's happening from Israel and the Gazans? Like, it's all related. And the Muslim community that doesn't assimilate with the Western cultures absolutely pays attention to and follows the orders of Muslim leaders in other countries. So when there's things called for, like violence right away, like it manifests and propagates it all across the world. So yeah, I think it's a major problem. And we have freedom of religion in the United States, but I'll just plain tell you that I have a major problem with Islam. I personally do. There's a couple of reasons I do. One of the reasons is the notion of Sharia law, I think, is completely incompatible with our culture. And we can't ban a religion here in the United States. I don't think that we should. But we can enact policies that make it very difficult for people from these nations to get here, right? So what is the terrorist backing? Are you married to your cousin? Things like that. And I'm not saying that as a joke. 40% of people in the Middle East are married to either their first or second cousin. And you want to talk about the Olympics, this man that just beat the hell out of this woman, arguable whether it's a man or not, XY chromosomes, maybe it's a woman. I can't remember the name of the lady. This has been major controversy over the last 2 weeks, but she's from Algeria, in a rural part of Algeria where the cousin marriage rate in Algeria is 40%, and recessive genetic disorders are incredibly prominent if you're marrying your first and second cousin. So it's possible to be born with an XY chromosome and female genitalia, right? There are several genetic disorders that are associated with it. So I believe that she was raised as a girl her entire life. She displayed as a girl when she was born. But this is somebody who's genetically male and just doesn't express that way, right? And so that's just one example. When you look at like IQs and behavior issues, I believe that like 30% of all recessive genetic disorders in the United Kingdom were associated with the Muslim community, even though it was only 3% 10 years ago of the population, because of the cousin marriage issue. So honestly, if there was just some sort of I don't advocate for a global government, but if there was some sort of a global law that just made it illegal to marry your first or second cousin, I think a lot of these tensions would go away, because ultimately I think it's because they're angry and retarded.
Well,
seriously, like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be like bigoted or whatever, and it's not to do with race. It's just if you marry your cousins for 1,000 years, you're going to be angry and retarded. Like it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's bad stuff.
Yeah, but then you pass the law and it's not stopping the act that is creating children. So maybe it just doesn't happen legally or through the government.
Maybe it's got to be a cultural thing. Maybe you got to convince the leaders in these mosques and things to really encourage people to not marry their cousins. And I understand if you're in a rural community, there's only 17 people, maybe your cousin starts looking pretty good. But come on,
Get on your horse, go to the next town over, just for your future, the future of your children. I agree, you can't outlaw religions, but we outlaw a lot of practices. And I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I had this woman on, and she's a really big proponent or critic of Islam. Like, she was married to someone that was I think like bin Laden's right hand guy. What is her name?
Man, could get things done.
Her last name's, it's not going to help because it's a common last name, but it's Mohammed, I think is her last name.
That's another thing too. They're always Muhammad.
Yeah. What is her? Oh, I'll find it and then have to put it in the show notes. But she was born in Vancouver, so like in the West. Yeah. And beaten, she was like a second wife, forced to live in the basement, and then she was talking about all of the statistics of little girls being rushed to the hospital in the UK and in Canada for genital mutilation, because it's a common practice within that religion. And obviously those things should be illegal. So it's like you take these things that aren't aligned with our values and principles, and we have like a really hefty fine if we catch you doing that thing. So like, yeah, you can't outlaw the religion itself, but you can definitely outlaw like a lot of things that they find important.
Yeah, it's so disturbing, and ultimately the solution is to have policies that inhibit people like that from even coming into your country.